Hello, and welcome to C-Suite Secrets. I'm your host, Heather Parsons. I'm an entrepreneur, fractional CFO, and business strategist. I've spent years juggling business, family life, and helping entrepreneurs scale, optimize cash flow, and build real financial success. On our show, we bring you real conversations with founders, executives, and operators about what really moves the needle in their business. No fluff, no filler, just smart strategy, systems that work, and insight that you can put to work in your business right away. With that, let's dive in. Today, we have Steve Meek on the show. Steve, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, Heather. Glad to be here.
I'm glad that you're here. It's very interesting chatting with you, and I would love it if you could share a little bit with our audience about how you became an entrepreneur and a little bit about your tech journey that got you here.
Oh, wow. So for the longest time, I was more of an operator type person, and along the way, somehow I lucked into getting very technical and worked for a consulting business and parted ways with that consulting business as a partner. And I did that right before 9/11. And so I always wanted to be Spock to somebody's Kirk, but I couldn't find a Kirk at the time, so I started my own business.
That's very smart. Very familiar with that time in the world. Great time to be in the technology space for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think post the whole Y2K thing, there was at the time there was a lot of focus around just keeping the lights on in technology, and it was rife for someone to come in and focus on innovation for organizations. And I think especially so in the smaller business space, I had a lot of project work around much larger organizations, and they really needed someone who could scale enterprise down to kind of the small business space and help them through that journey.
That's a great journey right there. So that's one of the things that we definitely always focus on is taking that big high level C-suite, Fortune 100 information and dialing it down to where it's something that's impactable in the small business space. So when it comes to technology and all the options and all the choices are out there, how do you kind of help them know what path to be on to start with?
So we kind of put together this program. We call it Star Power. And in our Star Power program, one of the things that we do is we came up with a checklist of all the different facets of technology, as well as the business and operational side, compliance side, those kinds of things. And so we kind of came up with I like to think of it as like a current capabilities evaluation. And so in our Star Power process, we meet with them, we come on site, we look at all their technology stuff, but we also try to make sure that we've got that alignment with the business. A core tenet of our Star Power process is trying to align the technology, the business context, the compliancy needs, the end user operational needs, all of those kind of things, get them in alignment, working together so that the outcomes, whatever the client is after, whether it's, maybe they're looking to grow, maybe they're trying to make systems easier to use, maybe they're trying to stay ahead of competitors on innovation. We're just kind of trying to figure out where the puck is headed. If you think about it that way, we're trying to help them get to where they need to be. For organizations that are just looking for low cost help desk, that's not really what we do. We do provide help desk as part of our offering, but it's more of in response to our ability to innovate, to stabilize, and make things better.
That's great. And as you're talking there, one word that kind of really comes to mind is being intentional, right? Being really intentional about what we're using tech for and how that it is really driving the business. So for business owners, one of the golden nuggets that I take away from what you were just saying there is around knowing where you're going. Really kind of helps to determine how that tech stack and all of the things that you're implementing play out and what matters most. I love how you're talking about tying all that in together.
Yeah, some of that in technology, there's a framework called ITIL, ITIL, and it has a structure for continuous improvement. And one of the most important things for continuous improvement is knowing where you are. Probably similar to, in your consultancy, before you can kind of help somebody navigate the paths of, their finances, you kind of have to get a snapshot of where they are. And, the same thing happens for us. It's just that snapshot moves rapidly over time and sometimes goes down odd paths. So we have to frequently do those snapshot check-ins to kind of understand where things are going and what's happening and what are the challenges in that particular organization's environment, whether it's a business or, we also work with local government as well. So, they've got completely different challenges than business. So through our process, we have to mine what those actually are for that organization.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And I love what you're saying about the snapshot. So, if you don't know kind of where you're at, it's really hard to know what you need to get where you're going. So 100% from the finance space, we're always looking to say, okay, today might not be ideal, but it's where we're at. We're going to be analytical about it and then figure out what tools do we need along the journey to get where we're going. One of the tools I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about is on that journey, a little bit about how you do vendor management, because sometimes I feel that, as a small business or a medium-sized business, we have all these tools and all these things that we're inundated with, but then we're trying to figure out how do we optimize and how do we use it and what do we do if things aren't going the way we'd hope they would.
I think you tapped on something very key there. When I first got into IT, it was all about the hardware, the software, the network, those kinds of things. But, I'm a 20-year plus cybersecurity expert. And one of the things that became apparent to us about 10, 15 years ago was just that things have changed so much that, it's so much less about the infrastructure and the core. I mean, we do those things. You have to be in our industry, but we focus a lot more on the applications, the data workflows, understanding those kinds of things. And to do that, we're typically not the vendor installing those applications for our clients. Typically, they're going through a third party. So we absolutely positively have to have command of those things. And, part of our onboarding efforts are geared around trying to understand what are your applications? Who are you vendors? What are you looking at? Especially for cybersecurity, in recent years, organizations like NIST and CIS, as part of their frameworks, they introduce whole new sections on vendor management, the third-party risk, because it's so important. The most important part of your business is not your firewall, router, or switch. It's where your data is. It's what your applications are.
Absolutely. I think, and you bring up a really good point there. Something that I've always found interesting as I look at some of those contracts that I didn't really think of in the beginning is around who does actually have the data. If you're in and you're using a piece of software and it's core to your business, it's like, do you understand who has that data? And if you terminate that agreement, where does it go? Or if for some reason they go out of business.
Yeah, I think there's two in my mind. There's two overarching misconceptions from people. One is that if I move things to the cloud or move things to my vendor, then everything's secure. Vendors, just because you move it to the cloud doesn't instantly make it secure. There's things they need to do. There's things you need to do. So sometimes people think they're avoiding the problem by bringing somebody to take that over, but that doesn't happen. And then the second thing is that for all organizations, especially when you're dealing with vendors, there's two types of risk that you have to deal with. First-party risk, the things that you're responsible for, and third-party risk, the things that they're responsible for. So for a small organization, I think their big takeaway from that is talk to them, talk to your partners, find out where those gaps are to understand what is my responsibility in this. Because if you're not training your people and you're clicking on phishing links, then that's kind of on you. Every security tool is going to fail. every system is going to break at some point. So each vendor kind of has their own limitations on what they're responsible for. Microsoft is responsible for certain things when you do Office 365, but they're not backing up your data. They're not implementing security controls. They're not establishing policies for your environment. They're not doing any of those things. That's got to be on you or your vendor to take on. Either way, whoever the company is, they've got to be part of that discussion and decision.
Absolutely. And what I keep hearing over and over again is the devil's in the details, right? So it's not just, hey, I'm going to sign this, I'm going to check the box that I agree so that I can move forward with using this tool. It's really understanding, what does this mean? Who owns what? Who's responsible for what? And I think that really is a good dive into like the operations, side of things as well. So from an operations perspective, how do you all manage some of that stuff in your organization? What type of processes and systems do you put in place for that?
So we have a documentation platform where we keep track of all of our clients. All of our systems are integrated. So our tool for ticketing is integrated with our tool for monitoring, which is integrated for our tools for infrastructure monitoring, which is integrated with our tools for cybersecurity and our documentation. So we've got all these complex systems that tie into each other so that we have that insight at our fingertips for our client organizations. Honestly, just the integration efforts is something that we try to bring to our clients as well. That, hey, you've got all these systems. If you're a city, maybe you've got body cam stuff that your public safety uses. Maybe City Hall has different things. Public waste. All these different departments have these different needs. Sometimes they can connect to each other. Some vendors have end to end, take care of everything. Some don't, but more and more that ability to interconnect or create dashboards where you can see various systems together, that's kind of some of the power of what we do. But it's an ongoing challenge. And I think the biggest challenge out of that is just that post-COVID, organizations got a lot freer with their technology. We use this term called shadow IT, which means that maybe you've got a 20-person company. How many of those people are just going out and buying software on their own or installing apps on their cell phone or installing something on their PC? Organizations, for an owner, for an executive, they really need to keep their arms around that and understand, what are my people using? Because if someone's got a great idea for an application, that could be helpful somewhere else. But if they're the only person using it, they could be storing your data that you're trying to protect out somewhere else where you don't know about, and only they do. So for an owner executive, you've got to have that command over who exactly are my vendors, what software we're using, and those kinds of things. You don't have to be a technical expert. All you have to do is be good at asking questions.
Absolutely. And you hit a nerve on the shadow IT part of things as well. From a finance perspective, that's a great way to start managing costs better as well. So whenever you do have these shadow IT organizations pop up, not only do you have a technology and a data risk perspective, but it usually costs a lot more money because you find yourself, whenever we come in and start looking at your expenses, you'll find that you oftentimes have 2, 3, 4 or more tools that can do very similar, if not the same thing. So it's all about, again, I hate to say it, but back to being really intentional around technology, around finance, and around operations so that you don't have these gaps or you're not spending money that you really didn't need to spend in the first place.
Yeah, and that's really, that's really a key part of our star power process. You use the term intentional, which I love. But for organizations, no organization has plenty of money. No organization has plenty of manpower. They're all struggling with those kinds of things. So we try to help them prioritize them in our process and try and figure out what those priorities are. But part of that is stop leaking revenue and focus out of your organization and put it towards the problems you really want to focus on. Maybe there is a tool that you need, but you want to secure it. You want to control it. You want to manage it. You want to know when it comes up for renewal. You want to have control over all of those things. And, it does, or it can squash innovation if you don't make it part of your ongoing conversation at managers' meetings and those kinds of things. What else should we be doing? What tools are you looking at? Where are our people needing help? What do we need to automate? What are our top 4 to 7 processes? Those are things that owners and executives need to be thinking about, talking about all the time with their team, so they can be intentional on where they want to put their focus, and if there's a tool, what makes the most sense for the entire organization.
Absolutely. And as you're talking about all of those pieces, parts, and ways to look at it, what's in your mind? What's one thing that they can do in their business today, tactically, to kind of move the needle a little bit on that? Even if they don't have somebody like you that's coming in to help them with that, what would be the first thing that you would recommend that any business owner do to get started on this journey?
I would say that the easiest thing, you don't have to be sophisticated, but the number one thing in pretty much every framework, security framework, I prefer CIS. There's an organization called CIS that has what they call their critical security controls. And so they try to simplify everything into focuses to kind of get things secure. And in there, they have something they call implementation group 1. Implementation group 1 is kind of the 56 controls that they recommend for basic cybersecurity hygiene. I tell you all that, not that you need to know that. The reason I tell you that is because number one on their list, number one on this list, number one on pretty much everyone else's list is know what you have. So for a small organization, it can be just as simple as making a list of all your hardware and making a list of all your software. That's where you start. You start at the beginning. You start at the foundation, because that helps you get to all the other things that you need to do. If you're using an IT company or an IT provider, we can generate lists of all that software. Most companies, if they're not able to generate a list of what software is on your network that they see, then you probably need a different internal or external provider. But that's where you start, just making a list of all the software and trying to figure out who's using it and why.
I love that. And for those of you that are listening, so today is a great day to do that. Go ahead, get a piece of paper, get a spreadsheet, do whatever you need to do, but just write these things down. Because whether you're talking to somebody like Steve or somebody like me who's looking at the finances, these are going to be consistent questions that you get asked. And it doesn't just impact your security. It also impacts whenever people ask about what's on your balance sheet. What type of assets does your business have? All of these things are very interconnected. If you're looking to do an exit, if you're looking to get a loan, all of these questions still have to be answered. So it's much easier for you if you'll go ahead and start this list and give it a look. Once every 6 months to a year, take a look at it, say, okay, what have we added? What's fallen off? What are we still using? And then that way, at least you know where you're at and what your starting point is.
Yeah, I mean, post-COVID, every executive has had to get more involved with their technology, regardless of whether they wanted to or not. But you should see some payoffs out of that, by becoming involved in your IT, your technology, your cybersecurity, it should feel less like a trip to the principal's office, and more like going to a little league game. Somebody's going to have orange slices waiting for you at the end, meaning things are going to get better just by you paying more attention, and you're going to see the benefits from it.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great way to look at it. I love your orange slice analogy. That way, because that's the goal. We all got into our business with an end game in mind, or a lifestyle, or whatever we're looking for. And these are just little pieces to the whole puzzle that we need to do along the way to make our life easier. Not something that should be a drudgery, like going to the dentist, but definitely something that can make life easier in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's. Go ahead.
No, please.
I was just going to say that that's one of the challenges. A lot of executives, I think, see cybersecurity as, man, I got to do all of this stuff, or man, we're in grave danger. All of that's true, but it's less about trying to do everything at once, and trusting the process. Going through the structure of, okay, I know I only have so much money. What's the one thing I'm going to do this quarter? Maybe I have no money, so it's going to be, I'm going to write one policy, or maybe it's, we need to add this tool, or maybe we need to make this change. But don't think that you're climbing a huge mountain. Think that you're on a journey, and it's not about getting to the top of the mountain. It's making the first leg of that journey.
That's a great point. And as I think about technology and budgeting and what that looks like from an overarching perspective, from my perspective, it's all about that roadmap and knowing kind of where you're going. And that way you don't have to do it all at one time. You don't want to have this huge, outlay of cash that's going out the door, especially for something that's not generating revenue. But I feel that if you're intentional about it and you say, okay, I am going to do this one thing this quarter and one thing next quarter and one thing next quarter, not only do you kind of get your technology cycle in a way that's much easier to manage, but you also minimize the cash going out the door and still get the result, because doing something is way better than doing nothing.
Definitely. I try to explain to people, a lot of small organizations don't think they're a target. More attacks, you can read the statistics anywhere. There's more attacks against smaller organizations than ever. And the reason for that is organizations attacking organizations, whether it's a nation state or a hacking group or whoever it is, they realize that with automation, they can do these things en masse. They don't care who you are. They don't want to know who you are. They're launching attacks en masse, and whoever they get into, that's when they care. Once they get into your network, that's when they start digging into things and trying to figure out who you are, what you have, and what they're going to get from you. But they don't care. It's they could care less of you, and it's more of it's efficient for them. In their business planning and their structure, they realize it makes more sense for them to focus on who's easy to get into and what can we get from them. So for you as a leader, an owner, an executive, you just don't want to be that easy guy. You want to be faster than the guy next to you, a little bit nicer than the guy next to you. It's harder to get into my network. So, don't feel like you have to do everything all at once. When you go through your process, when you come up with your roadmap of how you're going to do things, just focus on the three most important things for you to do for your particular industry. Then focus on the next three. Then focus on the next three. That's how you get to the point of diminishing returns and really impacting your security or safety of your network.
That's some sage wisdom right there. And I do find the more I talk to technology professionals, the more I hear the very similar things. So it's about, you are a target. This is something that's coming your way, and we just have to be prepared. So the more we can do on that on the front end, the better off our situation will be. And hopefully we won't be one of those folks who is in a ransomware situation or something else. Because at the end of the day, we're all trying to run our business, and we don't need that level of scrutiny or issues with our clients or any of the things that go along with that.
Yeah, definitely. And, I don't want to get political, but, in the current climate, we've made some major changes to government cybersecurity, kind of eliminated some resources and efforts. So out of that, they're going to push things down to the states. But what are states doing? Well, in Texas, we have our own DOGE effort about to kick off. We're kind of cutting costs and reducing agencies and things. So the net effect is it's going to put more and more pressure on individual organizations to secure themselves, because we won't have the federal involvement to kind of control these attacking groups. We won't have quite the support from the state level yet, because they're kind of reduced. They've got their own reductions. So individual organizations are going to need more and more in the future just to keep where they are today.
Absolutely. And I think whenever we talk about that, and it's just a shift in responsibility. So regardless of who's in office or what your political beliefs are, it's about, at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you're responsible for your stuff. So if your vendor decides to change their licensing agreement or how they manage data and they're breached, it's just the same as if we have, what our government involvement looks like. So it's all comes back to that, what you do internally, what your operations look like, and how you're managing for some of these situations.
Yeah, definitely. Terms and conditions are a really big thing that you should read through and understand, and talk to your attorney about. As you engage with your top vendors, your top clients, doing vendor risk checklists as you're evaluating new clients. You should be able to search out there and find all kinds of guidance on that. But doing your due diligence, not just in IT, but all of your service and operations and tools is so important.
Absolutely. And I could definitely talk about, tech and cybersecurity and all that all day long. I do have a couple of extra questions for you around like your business and how you operate it. So,
Okay.
from a tech and operations perspective or finance, what's one thing that you've implemented over the last 12 months that's really kind of improved how you run your own business?
We've ascribed to a management framework called scaling up. It used to be called the Rockefeller habits, and we self-implemented, and that worked for us. Fairly well for a long time. But as part of us taking on a business coach, in recent months, we just have a really good rhythm of how we go through our metrics now. So every single week at our managers meeting, we probably track like 60 or so metrics regularly. But every week at our managers meeting, we kind of go through those, just en masse, and just kind of look for outliers, looking for things in our business that are changing or trends that we need to worry about. In our monthly meeting, we take our top 7 company metrics, and we discuss those with our entire employee group. But I think the two things there is having a large number of metrics at the ready in case you want to dig in and get more information, but not trying to focus on all 60. Find that the 5 to 7 that are most important for your organization, that are the priorities. Every one of those key metrics, those 5 to 7 key metrics, should have an owner who should know what that number is all the time to make sure that you're steering the boat the right way. Think of our company as this big ship that I'm navigating across the Atlantic. To steer a ship, I can't get part ways through the journey and all of a sudden I need to do a huge dog leg right to get where I'm going. I'm making small adjustments all throughout my ship's journey to make sure that we stay on course.
I absolutely love that. KPIs is something that we're heavily focused on in the finance world. 60 KPIs does feel like a lot, but I totally am in alignment with you on how that works in the long run, just so that and it's being updated and you can kind of keep a finger on the pulse for what's going on in the business. So with that in mind, what are 1 or 2 of those top KPIs that you all focus on?
Top KPIs that we focus on. We have a metric. We use a term, labor loaded gross margin.
Okay.
In our industry, there's a lot of tools that we have as part of our offering. Every managed service provider is a little bit different, but we got quite a few tools in our offering to deliver all the things that we do. So we break down those costs. We break down the costs of the labor associated with what we do. We've got a service desk. We've got our tools platform where we're always innovating. So we've got that cost. We've got the on-site technical guys who are going on site and doing things. We've got our help desk. We've got our fractional CIO that's helping those people out. So we have a great understanding of what our cost basis is to deliver our services. And so what we do is we apply that to the amount of reactive work at each one of our clients. I take a reactive work as a slap in the face. That's where something goes wrong at a client site. And so we have to pull a resource to do that, maybe on the help desk or whatever. But usually that's a sign that we can do better. We can be even better. So I use that metric. If I've got an organization that has a lot of those reactive kinds of things, then there's something we should be doing better. Maybe there's some old technology we need to help recommend. Maybe there's a configuration we need to tweak. Maybe there's some automation we need to add. But there's something we can do about it. There's something that we can do as technologists and as a CIO to prevent that issue from happening. So I'm trying to prevent issues from happening so that our clients can do their work on things, kind of keep up with their business. But knowing that labor loaded gross margin and then looking at a ratio that we calculate to determine, if this is not cost efficient to us, that means our client is probably experiencing more issues than they should. So we're really battling that as our primary number to kind of make sure that that we're on track.
I think that's really smart. A lot of people get caught up in, what is my EBITDA, because people are wanting to sell their business or they're looking at their net profit. And those are super important, but if I take a step back, whatever metric you're looking at should be one that's really driving business behavior and business decisions. So I love what you're saying around, this is how we manage our people. This is how we work with our clients. And this is how we know if we're doing a good job and where we might need to make some adjustments. I think that's really smart. And for any business owner, regardless of what your product is, find something that you can make adjustments in the business with and focus on it. Because I truly believe that if you focus on metrics like that, it does raise the needle for your business. It does improve the bottom line because at the end of the day, you're paying attention. Well, this has been great. I definitely appreciate the conversation. I have one last question that I always like to ask.
Okay.
As an entrepreneur, what is one secret that you wish you would have known before you started your business?
A secret I'd have known before starting the business. Okay, I know what I'd like to say here. So I think of myself as a smart guy. In anything I do, I spend a lot of time on and try and figure out the best way. But one of the things that became apparent to me, and I think what really hit me, is there's an Abraham Lincoln quote. He says something to the effect of, "If you give me 5 hours to chop down a tree, spend the first 4 hours sharpening your axe." And so that really stuck with me. And so what that did to me, my first year, of course, I was all about the revenue. You got to stay in business, those kinds of things. But what it's really done to me is it's really changed how I spend my time, how I invest my time. I make sure that every single month of the year, I'm investing 20% of my time on becoming a better person, being a better manager, being a better leader, being a better technologist. Right now I'm on an initiative teaching myself about AI. I'm always trying to make myself a better person so that the work is easier. Over those early years, I was so busy just trying to keep up with things. I thought, man, I'll never be able to keep up with things. And one of the books I'd read a while back reminded me that, yes, there's a finite amount of time, but time management isn't the problem. The problem is that I, as an individual, I'm in control of my time. I manufacture my time. It's what I choose to spend my time on. So for me, that thing was making sure that every single month of every single quarter of every single year, I'm making myself a better person in whatever way that happens to be, so that I'm better at my job and things seem easier, life seems easier.
That is fantastic. I think, again, that's a very sage wisdom right there, because I know, thinking about business holistically, the person who I am sitting here today is not the person that my company needs 10 years from now. And if I just sit stagnant, it's not going to work for me. So I love it, and I definitely appreciate it. This has been a great conversation. If folks would like to listen and hear more about what you're working on, and how would they get in touch with you?
Through our website. We have a website, Fulcrum, FULCRUM.pro. I'm actually launching a podcast next month, Talk to the Doc, where I'll kind of dig down and break into topics. But I'll send you all the links for our website. You can reach me at my email, thedoctor@fulcrumgroup.net, or call our office, 817-337-0300. But any of those ways you can get to me, and be glad to chat with you. And I always tell people that I'll have free conversation on any general topic, networking, security, AI, whatever. It's only if we start getting into details and so forth that, at some point we need to talk about, an engagement. But for the most part, I'm an easy talk.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. And if you found this as informative and helpful as I have, please be sure to hit that like and follow button. It would mean the world to me. And until next time, remember to keep doing what you're doing, and you don't have to do this alone.
All right. Thank you so much, Heather.